You know, I'd like to, for a few minutes, go back in time into your past and your powerful story, because obviously the greatest teachings can remain abstract until they're brought into real time, real situations, real people with names and events. And that could really, I think, bring to life your teaching. So I want to ask you, you said before, anytime you took a shower, you didn't know whether water or gas would come out. How did you live with the uncertainty around you in any given moment? What thoughts did you think, because you said thoughts create reality, that kept you going from moment to moment, day to day?
It's such a good question, because I didn't know whether I'm going to be thrown into the gas chamber any minute. I didn't know what's going to happen before I was beaten and tortured, but I knew that I don't allow them ever to murder my spirit. I created a world that they couldn't touch. And I kept saying to myself, if I survive today, then tomorrow I'm going to see my boyfriend. My boyfriend, who was a very, very active Zionist, who belonged to the Betar, and he and I were going to go to Palestine, and we're going to go and live in a kibbutz that I was never really allowing them, even though I was told every day that the only way I will get out of here as a corpse. And I said to myself, that's what you think. And I actually created a world that they couldn't touch, and I thought they were the prisoners, not me. I thought that they have a conscience and they're going to really pay for what they're doing, throwing children into the oven without even gassing them. So I think the God that was with me, when people ask where was God in Auschwitz, God was with me. And Viktor Frankl even talks about it so beautifully, that if you are truly believing that God put you in that place for a purpose, these people went to the gas chamber with a prayer on their mouth.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. I didn't want to ask because it's obviously a very personal question, but it seems like in your instance, you felt God's faith, felt God's presence and even providence with you. Could you elaborate on that for a moment?
You know, my mother told me, I am glad you have brains because you have no looks. I had two beautiful sisters, and my parents really wanted a son, and I came along. So I think God put me in a family where I was kind of neglected, because my two sisters, one of them played the piano and the other one was a child prodigy in violin. She was the only Jewish girl accepted at the music conservatory in Budapest. So when mother told me that, I'm glad you have brains because you have no looks, I became a very, very, very learned teenager. I had
So
my book. They give you a name and you play the game. And so I spent a lot of time alone. My mother was busy with my sister. She was a kind of a theater mother, because my sister played the Mendelssohn violin concerto at a very, very young age. So I think God put me in a place the way I was prepared to face what it means to be alone and no help from the outside. And that's why when I go to schools, I quote my mother in the carol car, who told me, we don't know where we're going, we don't know what's going to happen. Just remember, no one can take away from you what you put here in your own mind. So I tell everybody to go and check out a movie called The Karate Kid, because they talk about the brain power. And that's what, helped me so much. So my mother took me to a ballet school, and I had a ballet master, I believe, who was a son of a rabbi, And he told me that all my ecstasy in life has to come from inside out. So I would ask people now, think of this time out period to regroup, to see what you're holding on to. What are you willing, that's a good English word, willing to be willing to let go of. So I think this is a period that can really change your life because you may let go of the need for other people's approval. You may let go of not trying to please someone or somebody and just give it up. But most of all, I ask people to give up perfectionism, because when you are a perfectionist, you're not going to be a human, you want to be more than human. So that's when I ask you to be a good mommy to you. And good mommies are before they say something, they say, is it kind? And if it's not kind, you don't say it, because no one grows on criticism. So I ask people to give up two words, always and never. I always do that. I never did that. Those are absolutistic words, and say in the past I did that. But now I am taking time out to regroup and redecide whether I want to be a baby or a big girl or a big boy. Because when you're a child, you sit in the back in a car and somebody's driving that car. But now I usually ask teenagers, do you want to be driven or do you want to be the driver? Because there is no freedom without responsibility. It's anarchy. And if you want to be treated with respect in your family, we're going to write a constitution, and there is no punishment in this home. Nobody is going to allow it to raise their voice, that there is negotiation, there is compromise, and there are consequences, not punishment. So I'm very much into democracy in the family, and to have a knowledgeable leader, but not a dictator. So I see three generations many times, and we have a lot to learn from each other, because I was liberated by the 71st Infantry, and I was taught how to dance the boogie boogie, and I like the big band, and I like jazz, and you call it supermarket music or elevator music, but that doesn't mean that your music is better than mine or mine better than yours. So I like the idea of cooperation, not competition or domination, because all we had was each other in Auschwitz, and we had to form a human family, because if you were just for yourself, you didn't make it.
So let me go back to a thing, because one of the themes you're really highlighting is the power of thought, the power of perspective, that no one can take something that's inside your mind away from you. And it touches on the theme, there's a saying, whether you think you can or that you cannot, you're right. You know, in other words, I think it was Viktor Frankl who said, quoting Nietzsche, if you have a why, you can deal with any what or how. And it seems that your particular purpose, you were saying, was your sister. That comes through very strongly from the book, your boyfriend. Would you say that your fellow prisoners, would you say that looking around you, did they too, if they had strong perspectives, that was the indicator that they would survive? And if not, you thought there's not much time for them?
It was on their face, and we knew it's just a question of time. I'm mentioning also in a book that this girl from Yugoslavia and I became friends. And she told me we're going to be liberated by Christmas. And Christmas came and went, and she died. So I think it's very important to be flexible rather than rigid and all or nothing thinker, black and white, all or nothing, life or death. I think we have learned how to live in the present. Mm-hmm. Like today, I live in the present, but I don't forget the past or overcome the past. I came to terms with it. And I think this is the time out. I ask people to look at their own lives, because there are no problems in the world, there are only challenges. There is no crisis in the world, there is only transition. If I go to Hungary and I ask about midlife crisis, they think I got something going, because people don't have time. The more affluent the country is, the more crises they have. Premenstrual, postmenopausal. No. The only
You
thing
think part of the problem is that we have too much freedom, too much time, and that's what causes all these thoughts that create deficient mental well-being?
time is everything. It's me time, me and you time. I remember working a family, and they had 10 children, and Jewish too, not the Catholics only. And the father made dates with each of the children. And then you have to do what the child wants to do. The Spanish says, a sus órdenes, I am at your service, rather than let's do this. That means do what I want you to do. It's very bossy.
Interesting.
So child wants to listen to crazy music, and that's what you do for 20 minutes. So I make rules. If you don't have rules, you're going to have chaos.
Interesting. Wow. One of the themes you raise in the book, it comes up a lot, is that your sister was very keen to avenge the pain inflicted on her and the family, and you took a different perspective. Perhaps it's an outgrowth of different personality or mindset, and you wrote in your book a very powerful line: when we seek revenge, even non-violent revenge, we are revolving, not evolving. And so I'd like to ask you a direct question with your permission. I hope it's not too direct. And the question is, do you forgive the Nazis for what they did to you? Do you forgive Joseph Mengele, the merchant or angel of death, who took the life of your mother even as he spared your own? And if you do, can you explain why you chose to forgive him and how?
Rabbi, I want to let you know that I don't have any godly powers. The only power I have is to recognize that forgiveness is a gift that I give to myself because I want to have joy and passion in life. And if I seek revenge, I believe it's temporary. Forgiveness gives me the freedom. And that's why I went back to Auschwitz. There is no forgiveness without rage. Don't cover garlic with chocolate. It doesn't taste good. I'm not such a good person. I'm a person who appreciates every moment in life because I can only touch you now. I live in a present. I live today, and that's why I think you have a very good question about that. But you see, when people ask, where was God in Auschwitz? I say, God was with me. God was with me in Auschwitz, and to guide me to turn hatred into pity. I felt so sorry for the guards that they're wearing a uniform, and they were probably born with love and joy. And look what happened. They learned to hate. Look what happened to us a few days ago when a policeman committed murder. And I was the one who came to America in 1949. And I worked in a factory, and I went to the bathroom, and one of them was colored. So I realized after Nazi Germany and communist Russia that there is such a thing as prejudice, which means prejudge. So I joined the NAACP, and I marched with Martin Luther King, and I was with him in 1963 in Washington, getting a hug from him when he said, we shall overcome. And look what happens today.
When you look at the world around you, do you feel like there has been progress or there hasn't been progress? what is your view sitting where you do, having seen the most vile hatred and having been miraculously saved from that, and now looking around in modern day society? Do you think this is the norm, or this is the aberration of the norm? Do you think the reaction of society demonstrates progress? There's an outrage against injustice. What are some of your thoughts about human progress?
I think we're recognizing that change is synonymous with growth. If we don't change, we don't grow. We're dead. We're just not buried. See, that's why I'm saying I always do that. I never do that to see, not say why me, but what now? Why is in the past? Why is the past-oriented world and a problem-oriented world? So if you have any guilt, it might be possible to say, if I knew then, I would have done things differently. But at the time, I did the best I could. The other thing I like people to get rid of is worry. And we mothers are worrying all the time. Don't go there, don't do that, don't, you're gonna fall, you're down, so we kind of, lots of don'ts. I like a lot of yes, I am, yes, I can, yes, I will. Saying a lot of yeses because I matter, because there'll never be another me. I am not preaching, I'm teaching. I'm teaching as you are. And the rabbi is the one who is not having a job. The rabbi commits to the calling. This is my calling, that I survived for a purpose, and I'm going to do everything in my power that our children and great-grandchildren will never experience what I did. I consider it my duty. I owe it to parents.
Wow. You're actually right, by the way, that the title or term rabbi actually doesn't mean a spiritual figure. It comes from the word to teach. Rabbi is a teacher.
I do too. I like that a lot. My second book is called The Gift, and 12 lessons to make your life better and different, to regain your power. You regain your power and assign the shame and guilt to the perpetrator. And then I began to forgive myself, but I never showed up for my graduation. I graduated with cum laude, and I never showed up because I had so much survivor's guilt. And I said to myself, I don't deserve it because they are dead. So you see, you don't have to go anywhere. Just go inside you, that you can be congruent, that your mind is telling you something, your heart is telling you something, and self-dialogue changes your whole body chemistry. That's pure science. So I like you to think about your thinking and pay attention what you're paying attention to. Any behavior you pay attention to, you reinforce the very behavior that you may want extinguished.
What you said before actually reminded me of a very powerful anecdote of my teacher and mentor, the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory. There was a Holocaust survivor who came to see him who was incredibly bitter and unhappy with himself and their life. And they asked the Rebbe, why did I merit to survive? And he responded with one word: merit? Obligation. It's exactly what you're saying. Don't see yourself as being as merited. See yourself as being selected with a purpose to achieve in this world, as you put it, a duty to teach and to illuminate and to heal the world. And this brings me to a point, which is, do you feel that the pain and prejudice and persecution you suffered through the camps has made you more empathetic and kind and sensitive to others? You mentioned you marched with Martin Luther King. How did that pain and persecution shape your own empathy and interactivity with others?
Well, I am understanding that Rabbi Raskin talked to you about me.
Yes.
And Rabbi Raskin I adore him. And the Chabad, I want to give you a lot of love and compliments because you show up everywhere. You take on anybody. A beautiful couple was murdered in India. Thank God the child was saved by the babysitter. But I'm going to tell you that in La Jolla and in Rancho Santa Fe, where Rabbi Reskin is, they did not allow Jews. And now we have a Chabad rabbi in Rancho Santa Fe and in La Jolla. So you see, I like to concentrate on what is. As you have a choice to pay attention what you lost or what is still left. So when my sister asked me when we were completely naked, how do I look? I had a choice, as you have a choice now. And I realized I became Magda's mirror because she was the pretty one in the family. And I was the one who had the brains and no looks. So I kind of took that seriously. So instead of telling her what she really, the way she looked in her nakedness, I said, Magda, you have beautiful eyes. And I didn't see it when you had your hair all over the place. So why not pick something that we can grow from, that we do not waste any time? Love is time, time. It's me time, me and you time, and me others time. And in Auschwitz, all we had was each other. Just like today, all we have is each other. And look at Gandhi. He was able to bring down one person to the whole British Empire, bring it down to their knees without any bloodshed. That's what I'm hoping.
You mentioned something before that actually was very striking. And at least for me, it was counterintuitive. You said that actually the inmates or the prisoners in Auschwitz that looked after themselves to the exclusion of others did worse than those who collaborated and cooperated, which is pretty interesting. It's amazing to think, because typically we think that in hell on earth, the survival of the fittest, only those who put their interests before others would survive. And you're suggesting the opposite. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that meant in real examples of people around you and how it worked?
Well, one thing I know, that we were there for each other. And that was so very important, to really be able to move beyond the me, and the I. Because if you were that way, you didn't make it. And I think that was very important. I like to tell you that my ballet master told me, picked me up, and he said, I just want you to know that all your ecstasy comes from inside out. But I had no idea what that word meant. And then in Auschwitz, I was reminded of that. There is no way I can change what is outside of me. We don't know what's going to happen next. And that's why people are now feeling so frustrated, because there is no guarantee, there is no certainty, there is only probability.
Tell the story about the bread from Mengele and the Death March. Tell the story about Mengele and the bread and the Death March.
My precious assistant tells me to tell you that Dr. Mengele came to the barracks and wanted to be entertained, and my friends just threw me in front of him. And I remember closing my eyes and pretending. Then the music was Tchaikovsky, and I was dancing the Romeo and Juliet. So today, when a woman comes in and tells me I was sexually abused, but I don't know how to tell you because you were in Auschwitz. And my answer is to her, I knew the enemy, you didn't. So there is no comparison. But when you suffer, you become stronger inside. That I know. And that is important, that So we're moving ahead. There is a Chabad rabbi in California, in La Jolla, so I look for what is, and when I finished dancing for Dr. Mengele, he gave me a piece of bread. Now I had a choice to eat that bread, but I was on a top floor. One had 1 foot, so cooperation was the name of the game. 1, 2, 3, everybody had to turn. And I shared the bread with the girls. And when I was on a death march, going from Mauthausen to Gunskirchen, the girls that I shared the bread with, they formed a chair with their arms and they carried me so I wouldn't die. Because if you start, you were shot right away. And I revisited that place. I went back to Auschwitz, to that lion's den, and look at the lion in the face. And then in Gunskirchen, cannibalism broke out. And I asked people, go see The Sound of Music. Go see Pygmalion. And that, you are in London. So I want you to know that when cannibalism broke out, I begged to God to help me. And all God told me to look down, and there was grass to eat. So when people say, I can't, I ran into the classroom, I go to the blackboard, and I put I can't equals I am helpless. And that's a lie. Because even then I chose one blade of grass over against the other. I remember sitting, choosing this. So don't say I can't, I can. Why? Because I think I can. The whole cognitive psychology is based on Epictetus, who was a Greek philosopher, who said it's not what happens, is the way you think about it does. So the way you think, that's how you're gonna feel.
That's tremendous. Actually, recently I was blessed to work on a book based on the teachings and the life of the Lubavitcher Rebbe called Positivity Bias, all about the themes you're talking about. He too lived through very difficult times, World War I, II, typhus epidemic, etc. And he said once that I chose to see the positive, otherwise I could not have survived. So it seems, as you're putting it, that actually crisis, challenge, adversity, and yes, pain makes us stronger and makes us better. So my question to you is, we live now in an era of relative freedom and abundance and privilege. And our children, please God, will never know the pain that our ancestors did. Your children, you write about so beautifully in the book, it was so important to you that they never experienced any of your pain. My question to you is, how do you give them the same tools for successful living to build up their inner world if they don't have those experiences?
I beg of you not to spoil your children, because those were the first one to die in Auschwitz. Spoiled children wait for someone to come and get them, and there was no one there. So the best thing you can do for a child is to prepare them to the world that doesn't wait for them, so they can do it without you. Yeah, my definition of love is the ability to let go. Let go, and don't do for the child, even if it takes them an hour to tie their shoe, and you do it in 2 seconds. Be patient, and of course be age appropriate, because children don't do what we say, they do what they see. So I think it's wonderful, the question that you asked me. Children who were spoiled, they didn't make it, that's a good definition, actually a victim. And you cannot be a victim without a victimizer, because it gives you a license many times to do zero. But that doesn't mean we're gonna blame the victim. My parents were sent into the gas chamber. They didn't have a choice. If they would have touched the guards, they would have been shot right there and then. That's what happened. And many people touched the guards and they were shot right in front of me. So the idea of fight or flee doesn't work. If you fought, you were shot. If you touched a barbed wire, you wanted to flee, you were electrocuted. That just didn't work in Auschwitz. You have to discover, not recover. You have to discover the part in you that no one can take away from you, your spirit.
You share in the book, there's a theme that comes up a lot in terms of what I love about the book. Let me just say, it's really transformative. What I love about the book so much is that it's written through the lens of positive psychology, in a sense. It's actually you're telling the story through tools and instructive mantras and themes. So it's not just a story, it's actually a self-help book. And that's what's absolutely unique about your story. And one of the themes that's very clear that you're struggling with is your intrapersonal self-acceptance and love and so forth, which you mentioned earlier. I want to get to right now. A beautiful quote. You wrote like this, about perfectionism, which I thought was, perfectionism is the belief that something is broken, you. So you dress up your brokenness with degrees, achievements, accolades, pieces of paper, none of which you can fix what you think you are fixing. And in the book, it's such a moving realization that you express. And my question to you is, how do you recommend the viewers today, how do you recommend getting beneath those layers, those veneers, those facades, and finding out what really needs addressing or fixing, as you put it? Is there a particular therapy you would recommend? What are some of the sources or resources that can help us, the viewers, tap into the real and true inner angst that we might be experiencing in order to experience inner liberation?
I think that the best thing for children is a happy marriage. I do very good pre-nuptial therapy. And I talk about sex, money, in-laws. That's usually the three topics that come up in marriage. And I think that way also you decide that if you're going to have children, you're not going to get a divorce until 18 years, until they are able to become emotionally, and until they are educated, until they become emotionally and financially independent. So I like the idea of interdependency rather than too much dependency or too much independence. But I like the idea of working, loving, playing. I like the woman, the pioneer woman worked alongside of her husband. Okay, not behind the husband. And the modern marriage, they go to work, they wash the dishes, they change the diaper. My grandson's wife gave birth to twins.
Mazel tov.
So one feeds one, the other feeds the other one with a bottle, and she pumps her milk. And it's cooperation, but you have to find the family within you. Find that little girl, that little boy inside you, and see what's good, and tell that little child, really, that you can be a child because I'm a healthy adult, make decision. So the two questions I'd ask is, when did your childhood end? And if your father happens to be an alcoholic and the child has to go and fetch daddy somewhere in a bar, then that little child maybe becomes mommy's little man who is going to take care of mother. So that's the first question. You want to hear the second question?
Of course.
Would you like to be married to you? This is a good time to think about it. This is time out. There is no going back. There is a new beginning.
Wow. So you mentioned a few such important principles. Number one, you said the best thing for children is a happy marriage. And then you also spoke about how you need to self-parent. You need to raise your own self, your inner child, in order to then be able to be an external, a parent to other children. It's interesting because these are some of the themes in your own life that came up. You were, in a way, the confidant of both your parents in an unhappy marriage, if I recall correctly. And so
I was
some of
the
that,
good. I was
sorry?
the good. It's a good question to ask. How did you matter in your family? You know, firstborn children who marry firstborn, they usually have two bosses, and you have a power struggle because when I'm right, well, as you said, we both right. You're dead right, and we're dead anyway. So you have to give up the need to be right. That is really very good in marriage, and become compassionate listeners. I make people repeat what they're asking me. So I know, and then I say, is this what you're saying? And they say, yes. Because when I came to America and people spoke to me and they wanted to know whether I get it, and I would nod yes, because I didn't understand the word, but I didn't want them to think that I'm such a weirdo. So I gave up my genuine self. And many of us give up our genuine, the true self for a formula that works in this family. To become the leader, the follower, the funny one, give them a name and you play the game. Just like Shakespeare, you know, you give them that life is just a stage, what Shakespeare said. It's
so what would you advise a couple who are married with children who aren't necessarily happy, who don't necessarily feel in love? Is that something they can achieve? Can they fall back in love? What can they do to generate deeper feelings for one another?
To love yourself, because self-love is self-care. It's not narcissistic. Be a good mommy to you. Be a whole person. If someone tells you, I need you, run. Because needs are things without which you cannot survive. We need to breathe. We need to sleep. After 3 days, you hallucinate. I don't know how long it takes to Gandhi, but I know at least 2 weeks I didn't get anything, and I'm here to tell you about it. We're much stronger than we think we are until we are being tested. You know, we are spoiled. So that's why Auschwitz, as today, is an opportunity for us to really go and start a new beginning that is really harmonious as a relationship, and give up the need to be right, because when I'm right, you know, I'm only right for me. So my definition of love is the ability to let go. Let go. And watch Fiddler on a Roof. That's the best thing you can watch. When he asks, do you love me? And she says, do I love you? What's the matter with you? I gave you children, I wash your clothes, and da, 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 da. You're crazy. And he says, I know, but do you love me? He doesn't give up because he wants to know, do you love me? Not what I represent, not what you see. It is so brilliantly put together. And that woman knows that the husband needs to know that he makes all the decisions in the world. And guess who makes all the decisions in the world? That woman is not smart. That woman is wise. At 92, I hope to be a woman of strength. Not a strong woman, but a woman of strength.
Wow.
And find the power that God has given me in Auschwitz that I cherish.
Wow. So can I ask, it sounds like when you look back on Auschwitz, you look back with a paradox, an obvious mix of course, I'm sure, tremendous trauma that never really goes away, but at the same time, a deep appreciation for what you went through. You see it as something that built you.
You know, I work with cancer patients, and I go to cancer clinics, one in Texas. And the title of my talk is Cancer, as a gift of God. And people look at me crazily because, you know, when I am with 180 women, after 3 days, they go home and many times they divorce their husband because the limited capacity they have, they don't know how long they're gonna live, and they don't want to be called the C word, and they don't want to have this drunken man coming home, and they regain their strength. I think Auschwitz, to me, put me in a place, I certainly didn't ask for it. But while I was there, I discovered something I never thought was possible, that I gave my bread to to my sister the next day, because in the evening we got a little piece of bread, which was like sawdust, and the soup that was filled with medication. So I ate the soup and I saved the bread because I knew Magda was hungrier than I was. So I think it is very important that anything in life is an opportunity for an opportunity. And this is the time now that you're discovering the part in you. You know, when I went to a Jewish school as a child in Kassa, Hungary, I was spit at and called a Christ killer. So that was also before Hitler. I didn't know that Jesus was a poor Jewish child who became a prophet. And see, I think it's very important that Shakespeare said there is no such thing as right or wrong, only thinking makes it so. And I'm quoting Shakespeare because I think he was a very good psychologist.
So you're saying a lot of what you're saying is that a person has to develop their inner core before they can be a functioning and healthy giver or curer to others. You know, first of all, Dr. Edith, I want to tell you, most of us sitting here can ask ourselves the question of how we would have reacted if we were, heaven forbid, in an Auschwitz. Would we have given away that bread or soup? But it's you who was there and did so that can really, I think, have learned something about yourself that most human beings will never learn about themselves. And it's something so deeply admirable and noble about you, Dr. Edith. And we're so honored in your presence. And so I want to ask you just a few questions that came in from the viewers, and then we'll wrap up with a thought or two. One asks, do you think one is born with a positive or negative outlook, or is it learned from our upbringing? In other words, if someone is more negative or pessimistic or entitled or bitter by nature or personality, can they change?
Well, you know, that's the nature, nurture. I think we're born good. We're not born evil. I think we're born with joy. I think we're born with love. And if you have that in your marriage, and if you welcome that child, if you plan a pregnancy rather than it was an accident, I think there is a certain order in life. I ask somehow everyone to stay in school because that's how I became Dr. Edith Eva Eger. I didn't speak a word of English when I came to America. So I'm really saying a lot about education, to go to the library rather than to the bar. And it's okay to feel feelings. It doesn't mean you have to act upon it. You may have a murderous rage if you're married to a doctor, and the doctor tells you that I'm gonna be here 7 o'clock. And I fix a beautiful dinner and waiting for 7 o'clock that comes and goes and no husband. What do you think I feel? I get down on my knee, I take a pillow, I beat it. I get the opposite of depression is expression. What comes out of the body doesn't make you ill. What stays in there does. So you see, and then I say to myself, that's not the best I can do. I can use this time for me. Maybe I give myself a manicure. Maybe I'll take a bubble bath. And when my husband boogies in, I say, gee, it's good to see you. I missed you. Rather than put him on a witness stand. Where were you? Your SOB and so on. No, we provide the atmosphere. I provide the atmosphere for a 14-year-old who's a white supremacy group member, and he's telling me he's going to kill all the Jews and all the N-word and all the Mexicans that was in Texas and all the Chincos. So reaction is different from responding. I like the idea of not reacting, because when you react, you don't think. You just shoot from the hip. If you don't like my neighbor, I'll shoot him. No, that's not the best we can do. And I don't like the looting now. I don't like the fire now. That's not what Martin Luther King had in mind.
Wow. You know, a lot of what you're saying, again, goes back to controlling your thoughts and actually designing or choosing your thoughts. But an obvious question is, it sounds easier said than done, because naturally a whole host of thoughts arise and emerge. And how does one control or manage or replace thoughts? Can you give us a practical suggestion for how to deal with thoughts and be more conscientious and mindful and meticulous?
Well, look up your birth certificate. Does it say life is easy? There is no guarantee that life is easy. But when you're in love, has nothing to do with love at all. It's a chemical high that only people get from chocolate. So falling in love may be infatuation, sexual desire, and it can lead to a loving relationship. And a loving relationship is when you are with a person who is a whole person, W-H-O-L-E, that they don't need me, but they choose me for the intrinsic values. So marry your best friend, marry your soulmate, and I think that is going to be much better than marrying someone you don't know, like Romeo and Juliet. They don't know each other. Some couples, we look so good together. That's not enough to look good together.
So you're saying that the definition of love is something where you feel like the other values you intrinsically and you value them intrinsically as well, not for what you give each other.
Yes, it's the being, not the doing. But again, you know, if you come home and if you are in a modern marriage and you see a piece of meat on a counter, you're not going to sit down and wait until she comes home and fixes dinner. See, that's what my husband did, called my daughter. You know, immigrants' children are parentized. My little girl was 2 years old and spoke 4 languages and taught me how to speak English. So we always went to her. So I came home from the library and my mother is complaining to my daughter that since your mother getting a doctorate, I didn't have a decent meal. And my daughter, I went to the bedroom, picked up the phone, and my daughter with the same whiny voice says, "Daddy, do you know how to read?" And sent her daddy a cookbook and this and that. And next thing I knew, my husband learned how to cook and make me a cream cheese omelet with caviar, because my daughter is not a cook, she's a gourmet. So my third book is going to be a recipe book with my daughter.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I hope I live long enough to do that.
Do we have another like 5 minutes for questions?
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. There's an interesting question from a young person who's saying, I was raised in a spoiled environment, to be honest. What is the practical way for me to find the drive to succeed and to transcend the entitlement of my upbringing?
The parents are not.
No, a young person wrote in and said, I was raised in I'm a spoiled person. How do I grow the integrity and strength?
Yeah, if you're a spoiled child, you're actually being crippled. And I certainly hope that the child says, I am depending on my parents too much. I'm going to see how I can negotiate with my parents that I am going to do what I am capable of. I mean, I may not be able to drive to school or walk to school. I need a ride, but I'm going to tell my parents how they could be helpful so you can not grow up to be a spoiled child and thinking it's coming to you. So it has to be, the marriage has to do two things, give and take and tolerating differences. And that's what I do with couples. And I would very much like to see the couple, not the child, the couple, that they would sit down with the daughter and apologize to the daughter that that's not really in their best interest. Because if you end up in jail, we're not going to be there to bail you out. See, that's what parents do. They run and bail out the child rather than realizing that every behavior has a consequence, not punishment.
Can I ask you, you mentioned the personal relationship you had with Viktor Frankl. And yes. Viktor Frankl is an amazing individual. I actually researched his life and career as part of the book because he had a unique relationship and encounter, virtual encounter with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which you can look up online. He was actually ready to resign because he was actually persecuted by his peers because he thought differently to Freud, and he was going to move to Australia, and the Rebbe sent him a message of encouragement. And of course, in his own lifetime, and when he wrote the book, he writes, I wasn't planning on putting my name to it. I also never thought it would have such an effect on society and spawn a whole genre of self-help. What was he like in person, Dr. Edith? Did he embody those principles and values, and how did that come through? What would you say, could you share with us a highlight of your interactions with him?
Well, I didn't tell anybody I was in Auschwitz because I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. So I decided to go underground until someone gave me the book at the university, and I took it home and I opened it up and I said, oh my God, he has the words. I didn't have the word capacity to tell you where I was because I didn't want it to be different. So I think without that, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I'm grateful. So when I read the book, I wrote very quickly, Viktor Frankl and me, little old me. And one day I got a letter from Viktor Frankl from Vienna that he likes to get to know me in San Diego when he teaches at the International University, and that's how we met. And so that's how, we found that we used the same skill to close our eyes and imagine. And so I was very honored to become a diplomate in logotherapy. And when he talks about the existential vacuum, I think this is a good word to use with the COVID, that we are in that existential vacuum. Because when I was liberated, I was very suicidal. Because when I got up in the morning, I realized that my parents are not coming back. The reality hit me. And I know God spoke to me and told me, if you die now, you're going to be a coward. But if you live, I'm going to give you something to live for life, for. And my name is Dr. Edith Eva Eger because I'm for life, I'm for uniting, I'm for love and joy, I'm for we individuals holding hand in hand and have a human family and empower each other, that you can be the rabbi and I can be, the great grandmother, and one of my great grandsons calls me Gigi baby because I'm short. I have a very bad scoliosis, so I'm little and he's little too, well, because his father is very short too. But he calls me Gigi baby, and my heart is just. So I think it's good to make a decision, but put it into action and make it realistic, not idealistic. Because when the idealists come and they don't find exactly what they're looking for, they become very sarcastic, very cynical. Hungarians are very cynical, very, very much. They think it's funny, and I never thought it was funny at all. I don't have such a sense of humor.
So somebody actually asks, how do you create new or better habits? There's a beautiful quote in the book that I loved, and you write, what are you going to do about it? I believe in the power of positive thinking, but change and freedom also require positive action. Anything we practice, we become better at. So can you share a practical tool or suggestion for starting new habits, keeping to them, breaking old habits?
Well, first of all, once you're aware of something, it's 50% solved, because you're not doing a defense mechanism like denial and pretend it doesn't exist, or delusion. It's better to be a realist than an idealist. But once you're aware, aha, that's what I'm doing, that's already that you're not in denial anymore. And then you're facing a decision, what you're going to hold on to and what you're going to let go of. But you can't let go of anything unless you replace it with something else. I usually talk about losing weight. People want to lose weight, and then they tell me that I'm pigging out on banana splits and I'm pigging out. And I know that they're never going to lose weight until they decide that tomorrow morning I'm not putting sugar in my cappuccino, unless it leads to a positive action. Because when we were liberated, people will go through the gate and then they came back and sit down. Eric Fromm was one of my mentors. And he said, I came to Mexico because I was sick and tired of treating people in America so they would live in a sick society. To be loving is different than being lovable. And I think it's very important for us, the Gucci and the Pucci and just, the kind of jeans that you wear with somebody's label on it. So I think it's the quality. The quality is so important. And anybody can give birth to the you that was meant to be free. So wow. The other word is free from the prison that is in your own mind and the key is in your pocket. So Viktor Frankl was my mentor and the colleague, and I was the one who gave the keynote address for his 90th birthday. And I can tell you that without Viktor Frankl, my choice wouldn't have been what it is. It's a female voice of Viktor Frankl.
Wow. I mean, I think a fascinating book would be one that described your relationship with him and correspondence. And, that I would find personally so meaningful. And what you said is really poignant and resonant, that you're the female voice of Viktor Frankl. So many of the themes about choice come through so powerfully.
The more choices you have, the less you feel like a victim. And victims will always find a victimizer. You cannot be a victim without a victimizer. And it can give you an entitlement to do nothing. but never blame the victim. My parents didn't have a chance to practice the freedom of choice. So we are very careful not to blame. You know who blames? Children. Children blame. When you talk to a 20 or an 80-year-old and they start blaming, he makes me angry, she does that. I know they always talk about the other person and blaming. I'm still talking to a child. You got to know who you're talking to. And then I meet them where they are, but you treat them the way they could be or should be.
Wow. I just a quick question. These are just a few little interesting sort of questions about you and your life and personality. If you could meet someone today alive and have lunch with them, who would it be?
I could easily sit down with Hitler, and I could say that sounds like that the book is, by the way, written by what's her name? The book is there.
Alice Miller?
Alice Miller.
Yes,
And,
I read that book.
You know, the drama of the gifted child. I still don't know whether Hitler's father was Jewish. There are many speculations that the mother got pregnant working for a Jewish family, and that's how, but I don't know any of it. But I would say that I know the story that you wanted to be a painter, an artist, and I know that you were in Vienna, and there was a Jewish guy from Czechoslovakia who walked to Vienna and begged them to allow him to take the test. And they allowed him, and guess what happened? The Jewish guy made it and Hitler didn't. And that guy felt guilty all his life, because if Hitler would have passed the test, maybe he wouldn't have. But Hitler didn't do it alone.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like you to read a book by Max Weber, a sociologist, Capitalism and the Protestant Ethics, thinking about the Jewish people as the pariah. So you don't kill people, you kill Jews, kikes and gooks, because I was told every day in Auschwitz that I'm subhuman and I am cancer to society that needs to be cut out. So they were convinced the Nazis that they're doing a favor to the society. So our biggest enemy is ignorance. Ignorance. Ahmadinejad said the Holocaust didn't exist.
Right.
But they didn't read Plato, who said you have to think of a lie and it has to be a big one, and we repeat it until people receive it, believe it. Yeah.
So just to go back, because you said something really astonishing. If you were to sit across Hitler, may his name be erased, Yamach Shemo, what would you tell him?
I told him, I would tell him that I hope you have a conscience, and I hope you realize that you came at the time in a country that suffered economically. And when you suffer economically, you pick something outside, and to take the attention outside of what is really going on. It's a good tactic and it worked. The Ayatollah used it too. Let's go kill Carter, you know, that you scapegoating. I'm working a woman now who believes that that's all that family done is scapegoating that person. And this is, so belief is different from faith. People tell me, I believe, I believe, I believe. I don't care, I believe. Well, what kind of life you lead? Show me. Words can be very cheap commodities, that you're for something that you never give up, ever. And our ancestors didn't have it as good as we did. And wow. Guess what? They never gave up. And you and I carry that blood. I'm very proud. I'm very proud to be a Jewish woman who is here to celebrate one of the biggest things that we have as Jews, the gift of memory.
Wow.
And thank you, Rabbi, for being in London and spreading the word and bringing and unite rather than the us and them mentality.
Exactly. And I want to conclude this such a powerful and moving session with you, Dr. Edith. I mean, I could sit, and I'm sure our crowd could sit with you and talk forever, but you said something so beautiful. We can't choose to vanish the dark, but we can choose to kindle the light, which is actually an echo of an earlier teaching of the founder of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, who taught that a little bit of light dispels much darkness. Right? We banish the darkness not through elimination, but illumination. And so.
And I want you to know that I hold my patient's hand and we go into the darkness and we discover, not recover, we discover there is a lot of potential in that darkness, in that shadow, to be able to think about it, yes.
Leonard Cohen, the beautiful Jewish musician, wrote, he said, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Oh, how lovely. Oh, honey, I'm learning so much from you as well.
You know, it's interesting. Dr. Edith, the book I'm working on now is Jewish words. The Hebrew word for a breakdown is the same word for a birthing stool, because every breakdown creates opportunity for new potential and birth, exactly as you said. So much of what you said resonates and reflects Jewish wisdom that you embody. And I think we are also honored with your presence, that you are a representative of Jewish wisdom and the Jewish people to the entire world, Jew or non-Jew, sharing wisdom for life and healing and positivity.
You know, Sholem Aleichem created a wonderful humor. And one of the things he asked, why is the sea water salty? And the answer is because of all the herrings in it. You know, that kind of philosophical humor that was created in the ghetto. And we had that kind of humor also in Auschwitz, that we were able to somehow thinking what will we eat and how we're going to make it. And we just talked about food and food all the time. And so I think humor is very, very essential in life. Good humor, philosophical humor.
You know, Dr. Edith, with your permission, I'll share a joke about worrying, because you said we worry too much. So there was a man who came home every day worried, and his wife says, listen, honey, you're getting too much for me. So he goes out and he finds a professional whose job is to worry for you. So he goes to see this doctor, and the doctor says, I'll worry for you, and he gives him the amount that it costs. So the guy goes to the bar after the meeting, and he meets up with his friends, and they look at him, and he looks like a different human being. He's relaxed, he's refreshed. They say, what happened to you? You're such a worrier. He said, oh no, from now on, I don't worry. I have somebody to worry for me. They say, how does it work? He said, I pay them a certain amount, and he worries. How much? 100,000 for the year. They say to him, but 3 weeks ago, you were going bankrupt. You don't have money to keep your business afloat. How can you pay $100,000? He said, that's no longer my worry.
That's very precious. That's very precious.
So Dr. Edith, let me conclude by inviting everybody here tonight on this gathering to take to heart some of the powerful and empowering and transformative positive teachings you gave us in order to actually transform our lives in practice through positive thinking and, more importantly, positive action, banishing darkness through introducing light, listening more attentively, valuing ourselves and others and our intrinsic value, putting others before ourselves to some extent in order to collaborate and cooperate, And hopefully in this merit, we will be able to heal a broken world, one in which right now we find in great tension. I can't thank you enough for taking the time and putting the energy into all of your powerful responses that will stay with us for very long, many years and decades to come. And if I can just say that personally, this has been one of the great honors of my life, to be able to interview you and to be able to hear your powerful thoughts. And I look forward to reading your future books, please God, future in the books, plural. We're looking forward to many to come. Dear Dr. Edith, let me bless you on behalf of all in attendance with continued excellent health, with prosperity, with peace of mind, with fulfillment, with purpose, and with joy. And let me assure you that tonight you have lit the spark of joy and passion and positivity in the souls and hearts of hundreds of people from around the world who are walking away more ready and better positioned and capable of doing the same for others, so that we together create a revolution of positivity, kindness, of loving, kindness and empathy and positivity. Thank you.
Shalom, 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 shalom.